What's up, everyone? Welcome to yet another episode of Provoking Conversations. I lost track of which episode this is. We've had so many now the last few months that I'm kind of losing track. But we're back to our interview sessions. We have yet another one of our fraternity brothers here. This is the third one we've had on. They're full of knowledge that that us Latino men can learn from. So we like to keep bringing them on. This week we have our brother Josue Covarrubias. He's one of them old school guys too. He's been around for a little bit, so we thought, hey, why not have him on as well? We've kind of hit that upper college level, higher ed stuff. So we kind of wanted to see more of the ground level, more of the general education. He's a middle school principal right now, and he does a lot of more. He sees a lot more of communities than some of the higher ed people get to do. So that's kind of why we wanted to bring him on. So Josue, thank you again for joining us. You can go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what you're about.
Yeah, thanks. First of all, I'm honored, that you guys would ask me to be on here. I'm excited to have a conversation with you guys, and I always love catching up, with the fraternity brothers. It's always an interesting time when some of the younger guys start referring to you as one of the old school guys. I remember shoes. But yeah, I really can't even deny it. I'm definitely one of the older guys, one of the old school guys at this point. So yeah, I'm excited, man. I'm excited to be a part of it, and looking forward to seeing all the work that you guys do here moving forward.
Cool. Awesome. You have any starting words before we get going with the questions?
Starting words, no, but I already do have a couple of questions in mind.
Hey, then go right ahead then.
Go right ahead? Mm-hmm. Okay. So I guess, let's just kind of get started with one of my favorite questions, just because I know how difficult it is for me to answer this one. It's who are you just as a whole person, right? Tell me a little bit about yourself, because I know personally, I struggle to answer this question. So I'm curious kind of where you're going to take this and see kind of where it goes from there.
Yeah, for sure. I like that question. That's a good starting question. I think when I think of myself and try to define myself, who I am, I think of a lot of other people, that come to mind first. I like to believe that we're kind of defined by the relationships we make and the people that we've been influenced by. I'm just a collection of everybody else that had an influence on me. And first and foremost, my parents, wonderful, amazing people. I was born in Mexico, in the state of Hidalgo. They brought me to the U.S. with my brother and sister when I was 7. And all through my childhood and into my middle school, high school, and college years, they had a humongous influence on myself. They were hardworking, working class people. My mother and father both worked in a meatpacking plant for pretty much the entire time that I was in middle school through high school. My mother had a back accident at work when I was in high school, and then she decided not to return to work after that because of her back injury. But my dad continues to work in a meatpacking plant. He's in his late 50s now, and at the point in his life where he spent a lifetime, kind of working hard. And it's nice to be able to look back and see that the kind of work ethic that they passed along, to myself and my siblings. But I think beyond that, I always knew that how hard they were working and the kind of work that they were doing, but it was like their words didn't match the level of work they were doing, because they were always so positive. They never complained about the work that they were doing, and everything that came out of their mouth regarding their children was, you go to school, you need to be educated, you need to do something better for yourself. That's why we brought you here, Mm-hmm. And so I grew up with that my entire life. I never even questioned the idea that I might graduate, that I might go to college. I mean, it was ingrained in my brain, from the time I was a little kid from my parents. They had a middle school education, and yet they knew the power of education, so it's interesting. After I graduated from high school, went to college, and kind of made decisions about what I was going to do with my life, it was very clear that education had done so much for me, was still doing so much for me, and I wanted it to do more for other people. That's kind of where I went into education, which I can talk a little bit more about here shortly. But first and foremost, my parents, they've been a humongous influence. Taught me not to give up, persevere through everything, have a positive attitude, a good work ethic, and anything can be possible. I also think about other people, some of the teachers that I had growing up that were influential, that were encouraging, that believed in me and helped me believe in myself. When I went to college, the other fraternity brothers, some of the advisors that I had on campus, some of the people, and I don't know how many of them are still there, but Mayor Ramirez, Dr. Bill Waters, as well as, other professors, advisors, Brother Armando Bustamante was our advisor at the time, like all these different people, Dr. Alvarez, all these influential men and women that helped me see the value in those relationships and helped me believe in myself to the point where I could empower other people. So when I think about who I am, to me, I'm a collection of a whole bunch of people and everything that they've kind of imparted, the knowledge, the work ethic, and the experiences that they've imparted on me. As an adult, now that I've graduated from college, have a professional career, have started a family, I like to think of myself now as somebody who is first and foremost a father and a husband, and secondly, I want to be a light for others. So in my profession as an administrator, a school administrator, I want to be a role model. I want to be an advocate. I want to be a planner for other people and other kids, that kind of came from a similar background as myself, and try to guide their path, to make the right choices that help me along the way. So that, I don't know if that's what you were looking for, but when I think about myself, it's all of those things kind of, combined.
Absolutely. I think that was, it sounded like a well thought out answer to me personally. And so I really like that. I really like the way that you brought in all the influences, because it's true. Like, I don't think there's a single relationship that you don't take away something from, right? Either something to do or to emulate or to kind of, take an inspiration from, or something even if it's just learning what not to do, right? So I think you bring up some really important points, and I guess yeah, that was a really good answer. Irvin, do you have any questions? Because I'm formulating one right now, but I think I just need a little bit more time to
Yeah,
get it
cool.
through.
I can take over for a second. So you kind of hit on it. As you kind of went through school, you realize, hey, education's done a lot for me. I know the power of education can bring towards others, so that's kind of what you focused on. So kind of walk us through kind of your educational journey so far, as far as your profession goes.
Yeah. As I mentioned before, I knew early on that I was going to go to college. I didn't always know what I was going to do, what that was going to mean, how I was going to get there. But I think one thing that was important was that was always in my mind. That was, ingrained in my mind. So I knew when I got to college, it was important that I finished. However that road looked and whatever path that was going to take, I was going to figure out along the way. And there was a lot of people that were there to help me along the way, through high school, through college and beyond. I actually went to college to study psychology. I thought I was going to be in adolescent psychology. I always thought I would be helping kids. That was always kind of, an area that interested me, that I thought I had the right skills for. And something that I enjoyed. Now, once I got to college, I maybe lost some of the passion for the psychology piece of it, but the part that remained was wanting to help others, wanting to help youth. And so that's kind of the path that led me to wanting to be in education, because I thought, what a perfect place to have that direct contact with kids that, could be influential, for their futures. Every day I was going to have contact, with so many individual students that needed, that advocacy, that needed, a role model that was going to tell them and help them figure out who they were as a person and what, was coming for them. And so that's kind of how I, landed on education. And at first it was a means to get to that point. I didn't realize how much, once I got into education, I would enjoy the actual professional educational experience it's like to be learning to be better at your craft, learning to be better at the things that you do well. So yes, you're going to have those interactions, you're going to build those relationships, but you're also there to actually help kids learn skills that are going to help them, in their future. And so it was something that I really enjoyed. I was a teacher for 7 years. And at about my 5th year, I kind of came to this crossroads in my life where I thought, I really enjoy what I'm doing, but I don't feel like I'm reaching enough people. I don't feel like I'm making enough of a difference with just the 75 kids that I see, in a school year. There's so many more kids that I could help. And there's so many more things that I could positively affect being in like a leadership position that would influence so many more futures. And so that's where I decided I was going to get my master's in school administration. So I got accepted into grad school, did my graduate program completely online while I was also still teaching, had my family at home. And so it was kind of like a night school type of thing. I took classes online, had to do internship hours, going and shadowing other administrators, and was lucky enough that I had gone back to my hometown to teach in South Sioux City, Nebraska. And right when I had finished my master's program, a position came open in my high school where I was teaching for a dean of students. And so I applied for it and was given that position, and was an assistant principal for 3 years in South Sioux City. Had some great, it was a great opportunity, had some great experiences there, helping move things along. And it was at about that time, 2 years ago or so, my wife was also in education. She was hoping to do, more for her career. I was hoping to do, more for my career. And so we talked about what were our options, and we had some contacts here in Grand Island, and a principal job came open here, and a teaching job was available for her. And so, we took a risk, decided to move our family and come to Grand Island. And, we've been here since. I've been a principal. This is my 2nd year now in Grand Island. And it's kind of cool to get to the point where you're now like directly responsible for things that happen on a day-to-day basis that affect kids that 20 years ago I was in those exact same seats, in that role where my parents we were low-income family. We were a low-income family. My parents were working, in these meat packing plants. We're kind of working, paycheck by paycheck, and be able to have those conversations, be able to, to work with kids and have them be able to see that light at the end of the tunnel. If you play your cards right, if you do, what you need to do, if you work hard and never give up, there's more to it than that. And I always tell kids, like, the goal isn't to be me. The goal is to be better than me. And so that's one thing that's kind of great about education is, in education, we like to say school is the great equalizer, because it doesn't matter where you come from. If you work hard and you do what you need to do at school, you can be whatever you want to do from there. It's maybe one of the only things that does that, in life. So education has been great to me, and I hope to be able to do that, for the rest of my career, and to provide that for other kids as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I think that's very, very admirable. I mean, a lot of people, once they kind of make it, or they kind of get their education, like, all right, I'm gonna they chase the money, or they kind of chase the fame. But you chose to, like, you know what, I know the power of education, and I'm gonna give back to my community, my people, to help them get beyond me as well. So I think that's awesome. And I know how you were talking about how it's like not graduating and not going to college wasn't an option, right? It was just like, that was just ingrained. It's like, it's just expected, right? Like, I'm gonna finish high school, then I'm gonna go to college and get my degree. And I think a lot of, like, especially like first generation students, Hispanic students, feel that way, because they're like, well, my parents sacrificed basically everything to bring me here. So it's like, now it's my time to do my part and kind of go to school. So I feel that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Did I give you enough time to come up with your question?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I really appreciated that. So I guess one of the questions that really came to mind is, when working with the students that you work with and their families, what are some of the like patterns, maybe patterns of struggles that you see in the student population that, at least, from our perspective, right? Maybe like a Mexican, Latino kind of heritage, like what do they face on a day-to-day basis, right? What are the things that, either prevent them from being successful or just don't allow them to be as successful as it can be? You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's a lot of things that I think play into factors, and it's when you're on the outside looking in, it sometimes feels like, what's the one thing that's maybe keeping the student? But it's rare to find one thing. There's on any one given student, and I'm sure you guys even remember back, in your middle school and high school years, it was never one thing. It was never like, if only my parents worked in a nicer job. If only, I didn't have this distraction. If only I didn't have to deal with being undocumented. All of those things tend to pile up. So I think for us working in schools, it's trying to find, like, prioritize what are the biggest needs that kids have right then and there. What are those basic needs that they need met before they're able to accomplish other things? And through, educational psychology, we talk about Bloom's taxonomy and hierarchy of needs. And, before you're able to ever fulfill, like, your goals and dreams and aspirations, there's all these other things that come before it. Like, you have to feel safe above anything else. If you can't feel safe, then you're not able to accomplish anything else. Safety is your number one priority. It's instinctual in us. So the number one thing is ensuring, when we're at school, are kids safe? Do they have safe home environments? Are there things going on at home that are not safe that we need to intervene and help with? Then from there, it's kind of some basic, like, bodily function type of needs. Am I fed? Am I getting enough sleep? Do I have a set routine? Because somebody can feel safe, but they don't have those things. And when you're hungry, you can't think. So if you have a kid who is at school and they haven't ate since the day before when they were at school again, they're not going to be learning because they're just worried about when are they going to be able to eat next. If you have a student who on a Friday afternoon is worried because they're going to go a weekend without maybe eating again because it's, the only time that they eat is when they come to school on Monday, it's coming up with ways to meet some of those basic needs so that you can just get them prepared to learn. You can get them open to the idea of what it is that we can offer through education. So, in school administration, it's when you get to see those things. Because as a teacher, it's not that you don't get to see those things, but you're so much more focused on, like, what are kids learning? What am I teaching them? How do I approach helping kids learn? But before any of that can happen, you got to remove some of the other barriers that are going on, and that's where we play a role as principals, as a support team, our counselors, our social worker, or our school resource officer. We're looking at removing those barriers. And then from there, it's helping kids believe that they can, because there's so many other struggles. They see so many other people that have failed in their lives as they've, tried to, make some of those dreams a reality, that they start to believe that they won't be able to either. It's like, there's nothing I can do. I'm going to end up in this situation. So it's just helping them just have an open mind to, if you just try, don't think about what are other kids doing. Don't think about, what are your older cousins who, are already working and have a job at 16 years old and have dropped out of school are doing. Don't worry about that, because you'll have those opportunities to make money as well, but be willing to sacrifice now in order to have a better life later, instead of trying to have a better life now and having to sacrifice later. And so it's just getting kids in that frame of mind and being open to this possibility that school can give them those things if they're just willing to work for it now and wait on that reward that comes a little bit later on. So yeah, a lot of challenges, and on any given day, you're faced with a new challenge, and some of the things that you have to deal with and help with, kids should never have to go through. And unfortunately they do. And it's our job as schools sometimes to play that role of, we're not just here to teach you math and reading. We're also here to make sure you're safe, make sure that your basic needs are met in order for you to be able to do those things.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I think you touched on a lot of really important parts, because I feel sometimes, people kind of forget that, there's still kids that, are going hungry, that's stopping them from doing what they need to do, right? They're not sleeping at night because they don't feel safe, right? They don't have a family that cares about them sometimes, and it's those things that, that truly that can make a bad student seem bad, right? And all you see is, their attitude and what's going on, but you don't see what's behind the curtain, right? You don't see what's happening in their lives. And
Absolutely.
That's something that can be hidden, hidden from sight, especially like in a controlled environment like school,
Right.
So,
Well, and we talk about this all the time, at school, that our kids, the ones that are successful, either have parents at home that are encouraging them, helping them be able to do that, or they have this internal drive that helps them get there. But there's plenty of students who don't have that. I mean, there's plenty of students whose parents work really hard but don't know what it's like to be good students. Maybe they themselves weren't good students, so they don't know what being a good student looks like. So we're not able to provide that support for kids. Maybe they work 2 or 3 jobs and aren't available to be there to help kids build routines. And so kids then just behave, in certain ways as response to the way that they've been raised. They don't know any better, and we talk about all the time, like all kid behavior is communication. Whether they're happy, they're upset, they're arguing with you, it's all communicating something. And you have to be able to, as an adult, as a professional, to look beyond, like, what are they doing right here and now? And what are they trying to tell you? What are they trying to communicate through their actions? And looking past that, because at the end of the day, like as a middle school principal, we're working with 11, 12, 13, 14-year-olds. They're still kids. They seem like they're older. They seem like they're like almost adults, but they're not. They're children, and they want to play the game of being more like adults and want to be respected in that way, as adults. But their brain still isn't formed as an adult is. And so the things that they do, we have to be able to, as adults, look through and be able to see what are they needing in this moment, and try to have those conversations with them. But sometimes it's trying to figure it out, because kids won't outright tell you sometimes, they're embarrassed. They don't know how to explain it. And we have to be able to look, through all of that, because very rarely are they just an angry kid. There's something going on that's there that we need to figure out, so that we can help them kind of return to being kids, return to being just students, and focus back on what school is about.
Absolutely. I think so I'm really curious about this. So I know that you said something that really stuck out to me, and where like there's there's some kids have those parents at home that support them and motivate them, and tell them that, hey, you're doing the right thing by going to school and doing the things that you need to do, right? And they'll help them with their homework, or they'll do what they can, and there's some parents that I guess they don't have that kind of mentality, you know what I mean? Or maybe it's also just because they're working, X amount of hours, right? Because I know my parents were working all the time. My dad was gone all the time, sometimes all throughout the week, and I'd only see him at night for dinner, and then he'd go to sleep and then wake up and go to work construction, right? And then my mom would constantly be doing house stuff, right? So everything that I was doing was just kid stuff, and it was just kid stuff. So it was just like, don't come bother me with your kid stuff. Like, you just need to do the things that you need to do. You need to go to school. You need to get good grades. And in a way, school was a large part of the place where I learned to just, do human things, right? Learn to communicate with other people, learn to work with others, learn to do all these things, right? And I never felt like I had somebody kind of, pushing me in the right direction, or telling me like what all these things meant, because, as especially middle school, right? Like, you're starting to get all these, weird, emotions and feelings and things that, you maybe not have felt ever in your life, right? And like a bad day at school feels like the end of the world, And it can be so easily trivialized when, you know, you're like, as a dad, you're worried about how you're going to pay the bills at the end of the week. You know what I mean? And
Right.
so I'm curious, it's like, how do you reach those students that maybe don't have that internal drive to, you know, not break through the cycle that, you know, their parents, their cousins, their uncles, their aunts have kind of already created, you know, of maybe like dropping out of high school, you know, maybe
Mhm.
getting pregnant at an early age, you know, trying to be an adult too soon. At least that's what it kind of seems like, right? And so how do you help those students? Because I'm really intrigued by that.
Yeah. Well, it's trying to meet them where they are and try to figure out what their individual needs are. Um, there's kind of this quote that I've tried to live my life as an educator by that says, kids that are loved, that have the skills to be successful, come to school to learn. Kids that are not loved at home, that are not taught the skills at home to be successful, they come to school to be loved and learn the skills to be successful. So, you know, you have to be able to approach any situation with a student and try to understand that they might not have that support at home. And it might not be because the parents don't want to give it to them. It's just, as you said, that parents might be busy. They might not themselves not know what school looks like. You know, my parents had a middle school education. So by the time I got to about fourth grade and you know, in the U.S. educational system, my parents really couldn't help me anymore on school stuff. They were there to encourage me. They were there to provide support. They were there to push me, to tell me, like, just because it's hard and I can't help you doesn't mean you get to quit. However, I kind of had to find other ways, you know. So as school, we have to be those other ways. We have to find ways to connect with kids. When I deal with a situation, you know, with a student at school that is misbehaving, they're having bad attendance, they're maybe have a negative attitude towards things, I almost never make any assumption about that student other than they're needing something in their life. It isn't that they want to be here. It isn't that they want to act this way when they're here, but they're trying to communicate something with you without being able to tell you what that is. So it's trying to make that connection with kids. So spending some time, you know, to get to know them. You know, it's funny because when I think back, I don't remember these interactions, but I think about the power that they could have had. But as a middle school student, when the principal talks to you, it's almost always a scary feeling. Oh man, the principal is going to talk to me. What did I do wrong? But my goal is to, like, break down that barrier, because my job isn't to be there to hold kids accountable and give consequences. My job is to be there to help kids be successful. So as a part of that, it's how do I build those relationships with kids? You know, so I go and eat lunch with kids in the lunchroom. I sit at the lunchroom, you know, table with them. When we go outside, you know, have a little bit of free time after lunch, I'm out there playing football with them, you know, shooting some hoops, seeing them in the hallway, interacting with them, try to just be another supportive, positive adult in their life, so that when something comes up and it's a negative situation or it's a crisis situation, they trust me when I go to talk to them. And it doesn't come off as, here's somebody who's an authority person that's here to hold me accountable or to give me some, you know, punishment. They view me as somebody who's there, that cares about them. And yes, I might sometimes have to hold them accountable if they break the rules, but I'm going to explain it to them no different than I would my own children. Like, listen, we have rules and here's the consequence, but I want you to learn from this situation, and here's what you need to understand, because I want you to have this skill so that this doesn't happen again. And that's the approach that we want to take, and that I try to, encourage our staff to take when we're dealing with students is, they need the skills in order to do those things successfully. And when they don't have the skills, we have to teach them the skills. No different than if a student came to sixth grade and couldn't read, we wouldn't be mad at that kid because he couldn't read. We'd figure out how to teach them how to read. Well, when a student comes to school and they don't know how to self-regulate, when a student comes to school and they, don't know how to, mind their language, they don't know how to interact with other kids, they're aggressive. Those are skills that nobody taught them. So it's our job to teach them those skills in order to help them be able to do the other things that school is about. So I think one thing that we definitely have to do as an approach, it's figure out what skills kids need, figure out what things that they struggle with because they may not have that support at home, and be able to try to find ways to provide that at school, to find some mentorships, to find some connections with kids at school, find other positive, ways that they can interact with other kids, get them involved in some activities, get them involved in sports, the things that other kids that know how to do school naturally know how to do because their parents are encouraging them to do it. So getting kids around other kids that know school, like, and so it's just finding ways to help kids be successful in those situations. And here's the thing: is it's not easy and it's not always successful, because sometimes you're undoing years and years of kids doing it the wrong way, and we get them for 3 years in middle school, and sometimes we get through to them, and sometimes we don't. But the goal is always to get them a little bit closer to being prepared for high school, to be prepared, for the real world. And you just hope that some of the things that you teach kids, someday they'll look back and go, man, I remember having this conversation with Mr. Covarrubias, with one of the school counselors. And I'm glad that they said that, because now as an adult, I get it. I'm able to use that skill. Maybe as a kid, I can't. Maybe I don't get it right now, but eventually they will. And we just keep driving those same messages home to kids.
Wow. Yeah. I think that's something that that's super powerful. One, and I really commend you for doing that work, because I think that's something that's really sorely needed. Because it's hard to break those cycles, right? It's hard to get people out of those mindsets when they've had family like all the way around them constantly doing those things, right? Doing working instead of going to school.
Right.
And it just perpetuates that cycle if you don't get them out of it. But it's like undoing years and years and years of just all the wrong things, right? And just kind of peeling it like an onion, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, man. And you know what? It's tough work, but it's the right work. It's needed work, and it's at the right, to me, it's the perfect age. When we think about like elementary kids, they're little, and it isn't that they like can't be jaded by things or can't have had such difficult things that it's hard to reverse. But for the most part, they kind of still see the world in a certain way and still kind of have a positive approach. By the time kids are in high school, it's really hard to reverse things. Like, they have a set schema on how the world is, and it's hard to change, high school age kids' mind. Middle school is that age when they're really questioning, is my world really like this, or is it like this? And when the negative really shines bright for kids, their worldview starts kind of leaning in that way, and they start just seeing everything as that. And so it's hard to turn that around then by the time that they're in high school, because now they've had 14, 15 years of believing, those type of things. Whereas when they come in as sixth graders, they kind of have had some negative experiences. But we try to show them all the positives and focus on the positives in those 3 years that they're in middle school, when they're changing physically, emotionally, mentally. We might be able to just turn it enough that by the time that they get to high school, they just believe maybe that it's not as bad as what it's been up until that point, and they can do something about it.
Yeah. I think that's something that's incredible. And one thing that I kind of want to ask you about is, so I know for me personally, right, going through school, I went to like a small town Nebraska school, right? I'm from Julian, a town of 50 people, and we were the only brown family for miles. And so one of the things that I never saw was, I never really saw like a successful brown person from my perspective, right? Growing up, even when I made it to college, right? Like, it was very rare for me, at least because I went into the sciences, so microbiology, right? I didn't see any brown professors at all. And then I think it was my senior year of college, when I was shadowing somebody, that I finally got to see my first like Latino doctor, right? And that was the first one that I ever saw. And I thought that was something that was very, very strange, because I know it's like, I mean, I personally had like a lot of drive, but there was a lot of moments where I questioned what I was doing. I was like, can I get this done? Am I, made of the same material as all these other kids, right? Like, the imposter syndrome was very loud to me personally. It still is, right? I'm not going to say it's gone, because it's not gone, but it's one of those things where it's like, it's very difficult, trying to get somewhere and not really seeing anybody that looks like you, that has a similar story to you, that relates to you, that's done it, And so I'm curious, it's like, what do you have any kids that kind of go through those same struggles of they don't see anybody that is, at that level of, maybe something that they'd even be willing to shoot for, that's not just working at the construction or working at the meat packaging plant or cleaning bathrooms or working in, the food industry, right?
Yeah, man, that's a very common thing, and we're Latinos in the state of Nebraska. I mean, we are going to go through that. It's going to take a long time before we get to the point where, everywhere you look, there's other, Latino, brown men that we can emulate. I grew up in South Sioux City. It's a little bit bigger than Julian. It's about 13,000 people. But not one teacher through my educational career was Hispanic. Not one principal. There weren't those people there either, and I know, Edwin, you grew up in Grand Island, and so there's probably more people, but it still isn't very many, and I know that because when I was hired in Grand Island as a principal, I became the first Latino principal hired in the city of Grand Island, so as we think about that, you try to find people that you can still follow that have the same ideals. Because one thing that I want to do is I always want to uplift my people. I always want to make sure that Latinos are spoken for, advocated for, are able to be successful. But I don't want to be a Latino principal for Latino kids. I want to be a right principal for all kids. And so one thing is I try to be, the type of person that hopefully thinks is a good person. That interactions are meaningful with everybody regardless of the color of their skin. Now we know that regardless of what we do, because we're Latino men, we are an influence for others. People are going to look up to us. Other Latino men, other Latino women are going to look up to us and the things that we do, and it's something that is important to kind of blaze a path where there isn't one as much as possible. I hate to call out my people a little bit, but I think it's necessary that we realize that, with Latinos, we're family people. We love, others, and we love, other Latino people, but we're not exactly the type that when we do something that we're thinking about others at the time. Unfortunately, successful Latino people aren't always looking at ways that we can give back. We need more of that. We need more advocacy in our communities. We need more Latino men that have made it, more Latino women that have made it, that are going into schools and being mentors, that are getting involved in student organizations, that are out there putting their face, in the world for other kids to see that, oh man, that's somebody that looks like me, that's successful. Because here's the thing, as I mentioned before, I don't want all my kids to become teachers. I don't want all my kids to become principals. I'd love for them all to look into education, but we need doctors. We need, we need carpenters. We need electricians. We need, mechanics. We need all of those trade jobs as well. And there's successful careers in just about every possible, route of employment and career path that you want to take. But it's important that we show kids how to be that guiding light for others. So when I talk to kids at school, I'm not just talking to them about hey, be like me. I'm telling them who do you want to be and who's looking up to you? Do you have any little brothers or sisters? Do you have any little cousins? How about all the other little kids that live in your neighborhood that look up to you? Because I'm willing to bet you every single one of those kids thinks of you the way that you thought of other kids that were older than you just a few years ago. When you were going to school, you were looking up to those your cousins, the kids that lived in your neighborhood, and figuring out what were they doing. And so you're a leader whether you want to be or not. And what path you leave for others will say a lot about you. And how do you make sure that the things that you do, even the mistakes that you make, that you're learning from those and showing others how to then follow in your footsteps as well. Because not everybody's going to be a principal, and that's okay. But whatever you're going to decide to do, whether somebody's already done it and you can follow them or not, somebody else will follow you. And how do you leave the type of legacy that other people are going to want to, follow in your footsteps? And so I think it's important that we, as a Latino community, as a people of color community, that we do find ways to give back to the community, because it sometimes feels like we've had to be successful in spite of the community and not because of the community. So it's hard to say, how do I give back to a community maybe that didn't do a ton for me? But you know, you have to start somewhere. You know, my mom likes to say, you know, the best time to plant a tree was 50 years ago, but the next best time is today. So how do you start somewhere now? You know, like, don't blame others and don't worry about what other people were able to do or not. You can't control that. What do you control, and what do you do for others is what's important.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's important questions to really contemplate about, even beginning at such a young age like that. I think that's honestly probably one of the best times to start thinking about it, right? Because you seem like the most malleable, right? You're trying to figure things out, right? And if you have somebody there that's asking you those questions, right, kind of like a parent would or like a mentor would do, I think that's something that could definitely help out a lot of kids really think through things, you know.
Yep.
I think that's something that's really powerful. Absolutely.
For sure. And I think, like, part of the reason we started these conversations in the first place, for us, we wanted to, one, we take in a lot of content of like motivation or drive or like just like mindset stuff. But then we kind of talked about it, and we're like, we never see anybody that looks like us talk about that kind of stuff, right? Because it's just not as prevalent in our communities to kind of speak like that. So we're like, so we wanted to explore that more. And then, we started having these interviews, and we're like, why not show off more of the people that are successful that look like us? Because kind of like, yeah, you talked on it, we just never saw it, right? Like ourselves. So it's like, even if this only reaches one student or one person, right? Like that's one more person that knows about successful people than before. So, I think kind of what you're talking about is, exactly that. Like, just being able to show people like it's possible, and let me help you, instead of just like kind of forgetting about kind of where we came from type of stuff. And I kind of want to piggyback off of that last question. You kind of hit on the fact, you are a principal now in my old hometown, and so I'm very familiar with that community. And I kind of wanted to ask you how your transition has been from going from Tasu City to Grand Island, and kind of some of the similarities in the things that you see, like the issues that these youth face, and maybe some of the differences as well, to kind of have you've had to balance those things out.
Sure. It's funny because the size of the communities are different. Grand Island's about 50,000 people. South City was about 12,000, 13,000 people. But we were right there connected to Sioux City, Iowa, which is about 75,000 people. So they're very similar communities, not just demographically, but very much some similar values, some similar ideals, some similar experiences, that kids have had through their education. Meatpacking Plants is the big, employer there, just as it is here. So our kids are having some of those similar experiences. And it's important that you recognize that, because I think it's another connecting factor, between, for me, like what I learned about myself and other people like me growing up in that type of community, that I can kind of help provide some guidance, but also problem solve issues that maybe come up, through education, and look at it from the perspective of when I was in that situation growing up, when my parents were in that situation growing up. And then be able to contact people, be able to say like, okay, so I'm dealing with this difficult situation right now as a principal. When you were in that situation as a student, how did you manage that? And talk to people that I grew up with, or contact my parents and go, hey, when I was in middle school and I had these things come up, how did you handle this as a parent? What would you have wanted the school to do for you, or reach out to you and help you? How did you feel about things that were going on at school? Because that's one thing, is that I think that there's often in communities like Grand Island, like South Sioux City, where there's a high population of minorities, different socioeconomic statuses, there's often a disconnect between what's going on at home and in the community and what's going on at school, what we're trying to accomplish. So how do we build those connections and build those bridges and reach out to parents, get parents inside of the school asking questions, learning about things that are going on? How do we train parents on the things that people that grew up in education already kind of know because they were there? You know, when we think about our kids that are most successful, and you know, statistically speaking, kids that have had parents that graduated from high school and college statistically tend to be more successful at school. And there's a lot of factors to that, but a huge factor of that is those parents know how to help kids navigate the challenges of school. Whereas those that were not successful at school, when problems arise, they themselves didn't know how to manage those problems. And so they don't know what to, you know, to provide as advice. It isn't that they don't want to be advocates, because I get plenty of opportunities where I'm interacting with parents who are like, my school experience was terrible, and I don't know, you know, what you guys are doing, and I don't know how you guys can help us, but all I remember was whenever I talked to the principal, it was a bad thing. And so it's training parents that just because you had a negative experience, or just because you didn't have that experience, because maybe, you know, you didn't have the opportunity to be educated the way that my parents were, that we're here to provide certain support and train parents on what that support is, but also teach them, even though you might not have had a good experience, even though you might not have been in the same situation, what can you provide for your kids? Because everybody can still provide certain things, just the same way as, you know, you guys talked about your parents and my parents, they still encouraged me to do school. I wasn't allowed to give up, you know. That's something that's powerful, you know, to kids. Even though my parents had a middle school education, they knew the power of it, and they knew what it, you know, it could do for me. And so it's training parents what those conversations need to look like. What are the things that you can do for your kids? What are the things that you can make sure that you're keeping an eye on? And if nothing else, what are the questions that you can ask your kids to keep them thinking about things? You know, I talk about this all the time. You know, that one thing that definitely helped me growing up is I made some good connections with other kids whose parents had good school experiences and helped me figure things out. So I had the advantage of having some close friendships whose parents had graduated from high school, had been to college. And so when it was time for me to start figuring out the college entrance experience, I was able to go to other people. My parents didn't know how to do it, but they told me, hey, what's them? They know how to talk to your school counselor. And so my parents, if nothing else, were saying the right thing in order to help me, you know, reach those next levels, those next goals, or whatever it may be. So sometimes it's just training parents to say, when you have a conversation with your child, it's okay to tell them, I don't know how to deal with this, but we'll figure it out together. I don't know how to deal with this, but I would encourage you to talk to a school counselor. I don't know how to do this, but go talk to Mr. Covarrubias, because I know he's willing to help out. And then every time somebody comes into the building, you know, I have that conversation. That's always a good thing to be able to, you know, when you come into the building and you only speak Spanish and you walk in, the first person you see is the principal who's speaking Spanish to you. It encourages people to be a part of things, because now they feel heard. And that's what everybody wants. Everybody just wants to feel heard. And then when they're leaving, here's my business card. If you need anything, my number's on there. So giving people the opportunity to be okay with, I don't know everything, but I want my kids to be successful, and I'm willing to partner with school in order to help our kids, and making sure that we're providing that opportunity.
For sure. And I think that's awesome. I mean, you kind of spoke about it, you know, being the first Latino principal in the city of Grand Island, considering how big of a Hispanic population it has. You know, I know my mom, like my sister just got done with 8th grade there at Bar, where you're the principal. And I know my mom was like, wow, I couldn't believe like when that happened, right? She was that surprised. And that was throughout the entire community. They were like, wow, that's so cool. Like, that's amazing. I didn't even know Latino people could be principals, type of thing. So I don't know how much you get told, but, you know, the community does really much appreciate your work, and kind of, you know, being that role model, and just being someone who's like, you know, that person's made it. And, you know, you kind of hit on that part of like parents. Like, I know my parents, like, they didn't know how to help me out throughout school, and luckily they encouraged me with my schoolwork and stuff like that, even though they couldn't help me. And but they were still there as like a support system. But like, I know you spoke on, is being able to have those, encourage parents to be to, even if you don't know the answers, is like teach your kids how to be resourceful, right? How to how to ask the right questions and how to ask the right people the right questions and not being afraid to ask those questions. Because my mom always like, if she didn't know something, like she was gonna make me ask someone on how to figure it out, and she's like, "A mí no me da pena preguntar, verdad?" Like if I don't know something, I'm not ashamed to ask someone else. So
Yeah.
being able to get your kids to do that too is very helpful, especially during those situations.
Right. Yeah. Your mom's a good lady, by the way.
I appreciate that. um, yeah, you got any other questions?
I mean, I think the stuff that we've been discussing has been, you know, extremely enlightening. And one, just um, seeing the good work that you've been doing, I think is something that's really incredible. Just because, like, I don't know, like it's one of those things where I've felt like there's something that needs to be done, and it's really kind of you know, heartwarming in a way to see that somebody's out there kind of doing that work, you know, because I usually just see the negative side. I see, you know, the kids that don't graduate high school, right? The kids that get pregnant at, you know, at 16 or earlier, right? The kids that don't make it to college, or the kids that do make it to college and then don't graduate college because they, you know, they can't push through, right? And maybe there's a lot of other factors going on. So I just kind of want to take the moment to, you know, really, you know, express my gratitude for you kind of doing the thing that you're doing, because I think it's something that's, you know, that's super incredible. And I know how much I would have benefited from having somebody like you know, at least have one conversation with me, right? And just ask me those questions. It's like, you know, who is it that you want to be, right? So, you know, thank you. I appreciate that. I think that's awesome.
I appreciate your words. I'm not the type that, you know, knows how to deal with compliments very well often, you know, because
Join the club.
man, you know, to me, like, yeah, you know, I've been able to get to the point where I'm at, but so much of it was because of so many other people, you know, and I'm encouraged by you guys, you know, doing different things, you know, reaching out and doing things differently. It's funny because, you know, middle school age kids, they kind of view things very black and white. There's so much gray, but middle school kids either like view things as good or bad often. And also, like, you know, the one thing about middle school kids is they view role models differently than we do, you know. So when I think about, like, how do I help my middle school age kids find others and find people that they can kind of emulate, it's very rarely like me or like people my age that they're looking at. They're looking at guys like you guys, you know. They're looking at those college age guys. Excuse me, here I have some in my eye. We take our kids to the middle school young men's conference in Kearney every year that the brothers in Kearney put together, and every year our kids leave with like this new, like, fresh frame of mind of like, wow, these guys look like me and they're in college. I can do that. And it's funny because, like, those are things that I tell them every day, but they don't believe it from me the same way as they believe it from guys that are closer to their age when they see it and they get on campus and they're like, holy crap, this is what college looks like. I could be here, you know. And it's like, yeah, absolutely, you could be here. And then we put them in front of all these, like, educated Latino men who are dressed in suits and encouraging them to go to school and do good things like that. It's just so powerful to be able to see other young men of color being able to provide that, that motivation for kids, encouragement for kids, and be those role models. Because I think that I probably have more of an impact on parents, and I have more of an impact on, like, my teachers than I probably do my middle school age kids, because they're looking at, like, high school age kids, college age kids to emulate and be like. And so it's important that other young men are there making those good choices and speaking up and saying, like, hey, it's important that you do the right thing for you as well. And we try to bring in high school guys, college guys, into our building all the time, because our kids connect with them even more than they do with me. And I mean, of course, I always want to be, a positive role model and continue having those conversations. But I'm 34 years old, but my middle school age kids think I'm like 50, so they view me like their dad, or like their their tío. They listen to me, and they care about the things that I say, and they know that I care about them, but they're way more motivated by, like, somebody like their brother's age or their cousin's age, or somebody that they kind of look up to that's, closer to the age range that they're in. So, I continue to encourage you guys to doing these things, putting your face out there, getting other people's face out there, and sending that positive message to other people, to kids, to parents, that continue erasing this wall and this barrier that there isn't other Latinos that are out there doing big things, because we're everywhere. We just have to show our face a little bit better, and then we have to highlight each other even more, because when I think back at my, high school and college career, a bunch of people, come to mind that were influential to me, and yet it was like I had to go find them. I had to go, like, be in the same place as them in order to even realize that they were there. And that's one thing that, when I was done with college, I kept thinking, like, how do I ensure that I'm there for other people that were influential to me? I think about, some of the fraternity brothers, that were older, they were influential to me when I was in college, and they're still influential to me. But they're not connecting with the college age kids the same way that, like, you guys are now, with those high school and college age kids. So yeah, man, keep doing these things, because we need more of us out there.
For sure. And before we wrap it up, we still have the question that we love to ask, and that we kind of center around these conversations around. So we kind of want to ask you what your definition of success is, and kind of how you define success in your own life, and yeah, just explore that however you'd like to.
Yeah. To me, man, that's a good question. Success. I think there's a lot to it, but I think at the heart of success, it's finding something that drives you to get up every day and be better. It's how do you find something, whether it's your career, whether it's a hobby, even whether it's something that you're looking into getting better at, but how do you find things that make you feel that you're contributing, that you are growing as a person, and that you are reaching some goals. I think that's one thing about success is it's hard to know if you're successful or if you're being successful if you've never set goals that you're going to try to reach. You could be meeting 100 goals that somebody else isn't able to meet, but not finding that a success because maybe you haven't defined for you what success means and what goals you want to try to reach. So I think it's important to set goals. I'm a believer, and I had some great teachers and counselors through high school and through college that taught me about setting short, middle, and long-term goals for myself. Those short-term goals, they're your daily goals. They're the things that you want to accomplish on your to-do list. And those are important because they keep you feeling busy. They also keep you feeling like every day is important and that you're accomplishing something on a daily basis. Those like middle term type of goals are like the goals that you set for like 6 months to a year. Like, what are the things that I kind of need to keep chipping at so that when that deadline comes up, I'm not like behind and can't do it. So like, what do I, when I have time, how do I like, set a vision for what that's going to look like and what can I kind of plan for now? And then those long-term goals, the things that take you longer than a year that are like your vision for your life and how you want to impact others. And those are those goals that they're really hard to reach because you never really set them to a level where you're going to like on this day accomplish it. Like you're always working on it. For me at school, it's like the type of goal where I go, we're going to be a school that values relationships above everything else, that is clear about expectations for kids, that is problem solving and using data to figure out what it is that we need to help kids reach. I mean, that's like a pie in the sky vision for where you want to be, and if you work hard enough at it, it might take you 3-5 years to get there. And even when you get to that point, you're always still tweaking those things, but having those long-term goals and having like a vision for what you foresee yourself and the impact that you're having on others, I think is extremely important. Our middle school kids, their long-term goals are graduating from high school, but those middle term goals are, what do I need to do to be successful in this class I'm currently at right now? And even maybe if I'm having struggles in my day-to-day, what do I need to think about long-term so that I can change some habits that I've built. For our college kids, obviously the goal always is to graduate and set a career, but even before you meet that goal, there's so many like small goals that you need to be setting and some like factors that play into will you eventually get to that point. But if you're not setting goals, you don't know what you're shooting for, and you'll never know if you get there. Like it's important to spend the time to sit down and write that stuff down. I used to make it a habit when I was in high school. One of my coaches actually taught me once that he said, he taught us that we needed to make sure that we were setting a goal. This is when I used to play basketball, and this coach would say, I want you guys to write down some goals for the season, and you're going to put them up on your locker, and you're going to look at them every day. And every day you're going to be reminded, am I working towards these things or not? And if you're not doing those things, you're never going to get better. You might get better on some things, but you're never going to get better on the things that you know are important for you to get better at. And he was a part of that, that writing those goals, because as a 15, 16-year-old kid, I didn't really know what I needed to do. So I needed an adult. I needed somebody else that could help me with those things. But it was important to set some things that I was shooting for, and it really helped me. And later on, after I started like applying for college, and I started setting goals of by this time next month, I will have applied for 2 schools. By this time in 2 months, I will have applied for 2 scholarships. By this time, 6 months from now, I will be deciding which college I'm going to, be going to. Having those goals give you a to-do list on the long term, but it's also important, that it helps organize you and always keep that positive outlook. So I think when you set those goals, it's hard not to feel successful, because every day you're meeting, one of your goals that you set or getting closer toward that goal. I think success is a feeling more than it's a state of your life or a way of life. Because I think for me, I'm very happy about where I am as a person, as a husband, as a father, in my career, in my life. I feel like I've done well for myself, but that's not to say that I'm satisfied with where I am long term. For me, like, there's other goals that I want to reach. I'm thinking, when am I going to begin my doctorate? How long is it going to take me to get that doctorate? What's my next career move after I'm a principal for 15 years? But that doesn't begin 15 years from now. That begins today. So it's that same thing as planting those seeds. And I think once you become a dad, like, your success is also defined by, like, what do your kids do? So for me, it was like, I felt like my parents were successful because I was meeting some goals that they were never able to. So for my kids, I talk to them in a different way than my parents talked to me about school. My parents told me that it was important to go to school and graduate and try to go to college. I don't ask my kids if they're going to graduate or if they're going to go to college. I ask my kids where they're going to get their master's degree from. So like my 8-year-old, 10-year-old, they're like, well, I think I'm going to go to college at, the University of Nebraska, and I'm going to then look at, maybe getting a master's at this place. So like, it's talking to kids differently and encouraging them to, set some of those goals on what are you going to get better at, and never being satisfied with where you're at, always looking at doing more. And I think that, to me, that's success. It's always looking to grow.
Mm-hmm. You share so many great nuggets of information there. I'm excited to watch this back later to kind of dissect just that question itself. And we love asking that question because it is so hard to define success for yourself, and I think when you learn how other people define it, it can kind of help you see, like, okay, maybe this is something I should consider, or this, or whatever. And we love to see the differences in how people define success, right? Like, everybody that we've talked to defines it differently, but comes to a similar conclusion. But we love to hear how people get to there, right? Like, what path did they take to kind of figure that out? So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Eid, any comments, any more questions that you've got?
Um, no, I think that, I think that was a really kind of great way to kind of bring it all together. Because I really like that last part, how you ended with defining success as just, desiring to grow, right? Just always wanting to, like defining the small things now, but then having a vision for what you're moving towards in the future, right? And just always moving towards the things that are going to challenge you more, and then talking to your kids in a way that are going to challenge them the way that your parents challenged you and wanted you to grow and, outlive the things that they were able to do, right? And I think that's a beautiful thing. I think that's honestly, kind of the ways that I view life myself now, right? Is just, how can I grow? How can I be a better person? How can I, do something that I didn't think I was able to achieve before, or things that I hadn't even thought of before, right? Because as you learn, you discover you kind of break your heights that you kind of set for yourself before. And so I think that's something that's truly incredible.
Yeah, that's great, man. Well, and you hit it right on the head, and I think a part of that too is, what's the legacy that you're leaving for other people? Not so they remember you, but so that, what road does it pave for others? It's funny because when I hear myself answering these questions, that you guys are asking, in my mind, there's so many voices, so many people. I think back at my experiences, my parents, my teachers, but even through my college experiences, I hear the voice of Pachuco, I hear the voices of Chato, I hear the voices of Chino, some of those brothers that were so influential to me, that I hope that and you'll never know this truly, but I hope that my voice is the voice in somebody else's head at some point, and I hope that for you guys, it's the same way, when you guys have completed, your educational, careers at, in college, and your professionals, that you've made some of those connections and you've done some of the right things that, when kids are figuring it out, when our undergrads are figuring it out at college, the connections that you made at, at college with other people, that they're hearing some of those voices of the things that you guys have said as well. So leaving a legacy for other people. And like I said, most of the time you won't know that because you're not inside somebody's head, and they don't always go around, telling you like, hey, you were influential to me. But trying to live your life in a way that you hope that other people, have learned from that as well, because part of it is you got to make mistakes. You got to learn from those mistakes, but you hope that the mistakes that you made, the things that you learned through your life, are things that somebody else doesn't have to, live through in order to figure it out on their own as well, And so, trying to live your life in a way that somebody else will try to, follow in those same footsteps, not necessarily in the same way that you did it, but learn from the things that you learned as well, and be that voice inside of their head as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's all we have for you for today. We can't thank you enough for joining us here and taking the time out. I think I could speak for both of us. We've learned so much over these last few interviews that we've done, and this one's yet another golden one that we'll love to dissect afterwards. And we're happy that we're able to kind of share your story and share kind of what you're doing, and kind of how you're changing the world one small step at a time, which is awesome. Kind of what we're trying to do here with all this stuff too. So again, just thank you for coming and joining us here today.
Absolutely, I appreciate you guys thinking of me and helping me get the word out as much as possible, to help others. And you guys always know, if you need me for anything else, I'm here, and you know how to contact me.
For sure. So for everybody else that's still watching the video, if you made it this far, hey, we appreciate you because we know these conversations get long, but we hope that you were able to get something out of it, and we hope you join us again next week. We don't know exactly what we're talking about yet for next week, but we'll figure it out at some point. If you enjoy what you heard, go ahead and leave us a like button. Comment down below kind of what you learned. Kind of what your major takeaways were. And if you want to keep up with what we're doing and the conversations that we have, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It's kind of the best way to keep up to date with what we're doing. And And yeah, that's all I have. Yay, do you have any parting words, or Josue, you got any parting words for the people that you'd like to leave them with?
I got nothing, man. Feel free to say whatever you'd like.
Good, man. Go be a light for somebody.
There you go. So those are your parting words, people. We'll see you again next week, but have a good week. See ya.